Book Club is back. I could not wait until after the Roman lore miniseries to talk about the next section of the book. And you'll also see how perfectly aligned it is. I did tease that at the end of the last episode. I could not believe when I was reading this section how much it was echoing what I was thinking about while preparing for the Roman lore miniseries. In case you missed episode 1 of this miniseries, I spoke about chapters 1 through 4, and in episode 2, we discussed 5 through 7. You're free to go back and listen to those before continuing forward with today's discussion, or you can listen to them after. This is really the kind of book where you can jump around and there's no through line plot, if you will. It's a collection of stories. So if you want to jump, feel free. If you are listening to this podcast and you would like to watch, you can see the video version over on Spotify. And today we're going to be talking about chapters 8 through 11. There is a lot to dig into. I have so many notes. So why don't we jump right in? When I saw the chapter title, I had the sneaking suspicion, which proved correct, that I would resonate a lot with Kai's chapter. Something that she spoke about at the beginning of her chapter is the weight and burden of being the eldest daughter. I'm a middle child, so I don't have that. However, what she was speaking about for her particular experience, that lived experience, I did relate to, especially when it comes to your connection with your emotions. That's something I've talked about on this podcast and in my classes, my relationship with my emotions and processing them in some different ways, or maybe not always processing or expressing them or bottling them up a little bit. And she was talking about how she had her emotions, in essence, invalidated. And therefore, she sought to have support through achievement. She mentioned being born on Capricorn Aquarius cusp. This makes a lot of sense. This dynamic with your emotions as somebody with the sun ruled by Saturn, it's constrained. Those two signs are known to be emotionally constricted or just having maybe some difficulty expressing them. So that part is not surprising astrologically. And she was talking about how she was raised Catholic. I was as well. Christine was. And we have talked about that multiple times in this podcast. But she was more inclined to be broadly spiritual. And so she had moved away from the organized religion. And I love this quote. She said, "Things meant for you would not hurt you so much." So if it's causing a toxic relationship, if it is not allowing you to love and express and be yourself, or even just being kind to yourself or other people being kind to and supportive of you, it's not the type of environment that you want to sit in and stew in. To get to the Moonchild piece, she had started a meditation practice when she was shifting away from Catholicism and just leaning more into general spirituality, and connected with Mama Kia, the Incan goddess of the moon, and really was discussing how she's always had this connection to the moon and draw to it, which I have spoken about also on this podcast. So that's where the Moonchild piece comes in. If anyone attends any of my Insight Timer classes or has readings with me, I have 3 different decks of divination decks, 2 Oracle, 1 Tarot, and they are all moon themed. And I have some moon decorations in my room for my business. My logo has moons in it. So it's very much been thematically a motif for me as well. And all of that had really come to a head when I was realizing, like, I was already drawn to it anyway. And then I learned that I was a Cancer rising and that my chart is ruled by the moon. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense that I have this interest. So I would be curious if Kai has something similar, if she has actual moon rulership, because obviously the moon does not rule Aquarius and Capricorn, but she could have some other strong placements in her chart. When she was seeking that validation through achievement, very Capricorn, what actually worked for her was getting quiet, connecting to herself, and to the spirit team that grew and developed over time. You'll hear more about this in the Roman modernity episode. But yeah, I definitely have a drive, a desire to achieve. And when you have the Virgo placement going on there, you're like, well, is it perfectionism or what are you trying to prove? Like, I have a lot of undercurrents that overlap with some of what Kai was speaking about. I can relate to the work that I've needed to do, that my spiritual work has always been about slowing down, checking in with myself more, getting quiet and listening, leveraging my intuition rather than going off of a fear or anxiety response to something, a desire for control of outcomes. And that's, self-protection and defense mechanisms. I'm increasingly seeing myself in these stories as I'm reading them. So I really, really enjoyed this chapter. And then she did do the podcast interview, Divine Flow, with Natalie, who had authored chapter 1. And she was talking about how appreciative she is of her family, who now goes to her for guidance because she primarily is using tarot. And while my family does not do that, they still will come to me or ask me certain questions about their intuition. So I really resonated with how that family dynamic has shifted and really the position that it has put her in to relate to different people, significant people in her life in a new way because she has this different perspective. And overall, when I was reading her chapter, I just felt such kindred spirits. And then in listening to the podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, she has such a sweet voice. And I loved her call to action at the end where she said that she wanted everyone to go have a lovely treat. I thought that was so cute. So I just was listening to this. I was like, okay, I want to be her friend. So I am going to reach out as I have been doing every segment of this book club. I am reaching out to the authors and sending some messages and giving them the forewarning. Hey, I'm going to be talking about your chapter. So I would love to connect with Kai. I just really felt like a bond with what she was talking about and sharing, and what she was expressing was important and valuable for her. And I just related a lot. So definitely would love to chat. Sweet, sweet Emma. I was really, really excited to read this chapter because Emma and I have actually already connected around the time of the book launch, which was around when this is coming out. It's a whole year ago. Well, I forget if I reached out to her, she reached out to me, but we've had several back and forth conversations on Instagram, and she had read my chapter and, said some kind words about it. And, we had just chatted in general. And I have heard her speak on other podcasts. She was on Vanessa's podcast, who was a guest on Synergy to Sinistry in season 2. So I have heard from Emma before, and I was really curious because I knew she was going to talk about mudras, but I was curious to see what her specific origin story was. And how perfect, because her chapter in particular, it related to this whole segment, but also was really drawing forth a lot of what I was thinking about at the time that I was reading this book, which overlaps with the Roman lore research that I was doing, which if you listen to the last episode, we were talking about specifically Catholicism, Christianity, this organized religion, and coming out of this time period. And I was mentioning at the end some of the impact it's had. And I just kept thinking about that while reading this chapter and the others, because it just was a recurring theme that kept coming up over and over again. But she was mentioning how at a really young age, she had all of these questions and she would keep asking them, and then none of the adults could answer it, which I think is probably a pretty common experience for people, because oftentimes people will go to religion or spirituality because they're looking for answers. And she was already in an organized religion. She kept asking, why is this? Why is that? And then she couldn't get an answer. And then, just what that does for someone who is trying to form a belief system and understanding of what religion is and what it is representing. And to that point, something that I have been thinking about is just how much of religion, especially when we're talking about lore, like we're only capturing a version of what some people decided to write down that made it these hundreds and thousands of years. And then that becomes our interpretation. We're interpreting from our present mindset and perspective. And a lot of that was informed by what was actually going on back then. And really, it just comes down to this was all oral tradition. Like it was just people talking and sharing. And then eventually somebody wrote some version of telephone of that down. And yeah, just the huge ripple effect of those stories and how they changed as they crossed continents, or specific teachers, specific individuals changed words in the text or decided to interpret it and speak about it in a particular way. It's like the rock going down the hill, and all of a sudden it just starts picking up other stuff and it gets bigger and bigger. And it just seems like a lot of that is what has transpired and had such a huge impact. It's this invisible string of human intervention or misinterpretation. But a memory that got knocked loose while reading this chapter that I had totally forgotten about is when I was younger, I had briefly, for some period of time, collected rocks, and I would store them in this like little nook cavity, I'll say, in the root of this tree that was outside of our house. One might argue there's some sort of past life situation going on here, some sort of a spiritual connection of like, why was I doing that? I don't know. I don't know why I was picking certain rocks, but there's something that felt really special about the tree and putting them in there. And there's got to be something, or like, was it an offering? Like, I don't really know exactly what I was doing. So I was remembering this and thinking, I should research this and learn a little bit more. So I've kind of put a pin into that to look into it. Emma's vision when she was in her hospital bed reminded me a lot of spirit councils, which we had a whole episode on spirit councils and Akashic records back in season 1. And then Christine and I used spirit councils to plan seasons 2 and 3. So there was something about the experience and how she painted it that just like all these beings convening and talking to her, and they were in that story like kind of passing like a judgment almost of like, well, you're not ready. And in that way it was a little bit different, but it did feel reminiscent of that. And also the dream that she had shared where she had like the light entering her reminded me of one that I had in February of this year, where it's like I dreamed that I woke up, because in the dream I was trying to wake myself up and I was trying to grab my phone because I wanted to write down what happened in my dream so I could share it. I would reach for my phone and it's like my hand would go right through it, or I couldn't pick it up, or it couldn't work. And so then I was realizing in the dream, oh no, I'm asleep. I haven't woken myself up yet. And it kept happening like over and over and over again. So I was dreaming and I was channeling and had messages coming in. But then at the same time, I was trying to wake myself up. Eventually, finally, it worked. And I did wake up and I was in the same exact position that I was in the dream. So it's like I had this weird, like out of body experience where I was awake, but I was asleep, but I was channeling at the same time. And I have not had an experience like that before. So I don't know exactly what was going on, or if I'm going to be having more of a shift in how I'm receiving certain messages through dreams. TBD on that. In the podcast, when Natalie interviewed her, she was speaking about how when we make the choice to go down a spiritual path, that it actually can make our lives harder. And that's because there is this resistance energy. So in order for us to level up, there's some sort of a dip, or we have pushback, or we are tested, we are tried in some way, and that we are constantly like going up and down these ramps and then having the plateaus or the frustration or confusion. Or in a previous chapter, we had talked about how there could be ego involved in trying to have that up level and wanting that experience to happen and get to the next stage and phase. And what Emma was talking about is, in knowing that, if we just continue to do the work, find an openness and willingness to course correct, to ground, to connect to our guides, then we'll ultimately be able to navigate that very challenging life path in a smoother way. And so then it becomes more of a net positive, even if it does feel really challenging. That's something that I have talked to so many people about. I've experienced myself, and I just thought it was a really great and important point for her to make. That's not even speaking to like dealing with stereotypes or self-doubt, or is it anxiety, is it intuition, or learning certain tools, and do you like them, do you not like them, do they work, do they not work, are you finding community, do you feel alone, do you feel connected? Like there's so many other facets to it beyond just, do you feel like you're growing or that you are able to push forward with the lessons that you're being asked to learn, supposed to learn, if you will. Now, I can't talk about Emma's chapter or podcast or workshop, because she did all three, the trifecta, without discussing the mudras. If you are not familiar with what mudras are, we actually did talk about them in our season 2 finale with Kier. And we had a few of them. I put in the infographics of some different examples of mudras in the meditation that she led us through at the end of the episode. But Emma teaches, practices, and created actually a little oracle deck where you can pull different mudras from it, which is super cool. And it was really fascinating to hear about the instinctiveness, call it intuition, of the fact that we have certain mudras, in other words, hand positions, things that we are doing with our fingers and palms, whether independently or connected to each other. Energetically, they actually make sense for the purpose of what we want to do with them. One of the common ones that she talks about is this triangle. So you have the fingertips together and then the thumbs out to the side and those together. Oftentimes you have speakers, like I think of like tech people, but business people, they'll do that all the time when they're talking. And actually, this is a mudra and it relates to focus. So it's like someone who's really concentrating because they're doing a speech and they're talking. Like it makes sense that they're just subconsciously doing that. And that's a position where they just know to put their hands because they're trying to focus. I'm sure there's countless other examples like that, but that was one that she had highlighted. And in her actual workshop, she was teaching about different mudras for developing intuition. I was like, well, this is awesome because maybe there's some that I could practice. Because if you're sitting in meditation, you're already trying to work on connecting to your intuition. Why not add another tool to supplement and enhance what you're already doing? You can use mudras, you can use crystals, you can use essential oils, incense, sound, lots of different amplification methods. I wanted to read this quote because I think it says so much. She wrote, "When we don't listen to our intuition, we are rerouting." And I love that analogy because it's like the GPS just rerouting, because it captures the free will where we're going to learn regardless of which road we go down. If we ignore, if you will, the machine, the GPS, our intuition, it just means it's going to be different lessons along the way. We have to go around. We're going to hit some speed bumps. We're going to hit some potholes. We're going to have to change our flat tire versus if we went another way. The yogic philosophy that the heart, not the mind, is the center of consciousness. Weaving all of that together, like with intuition, with being heart-centered. That's something Vanessa had also spoken about in the podcast. Healing the heart space. And then folding it all in, like this was connecting with so many topics that we discussed in the podcast, which I loved. Prana, which is the equivalent of chi when we were talking about feng shui in our feng shui episode. So you have your prana, which is the energy that moves through your body that connects to the chakra system, which we talked about with our Reiki episode with Lisa in season 1. So you have intuition, you have energy, you have chakras related to energy, and you have your physical body with the mudras, the placement, but they're activating. Like it's not that we're just doing all these separate. My mind was totally blown when she was explaining, like, okay, well, each of your fingers are associated with a different chakra. So if you are connecting basically one chakra to another, and you're saying, I want to activate the root and I want to activate the sacral, and then this is the position that lets me do that. It's like, Oh, okay. It's not that they are totally separate practices that we're just happening to layer. They are intrinsically linked with each other. So our energetic body, that's Reiki, that is the chakra system, with our physical body, our fingers, our hands, then our intuition, which is connecting to the higher level frequency. So we have all of those pieces coming together. And then if it's helping to engage our mind, to clear our mind, to create space for the intuitive wisdom to come through, then it becomes this symbiotic relationship, which yeah, I just thought everything that Emma did was so well done. And I just was sitting there like taking all these notes, like, this is so great. This is so interesting. And yeah, I would love to find some more ways to incorporate some of the mudras. As we all know, especially if you're watching, and if you've attended any of my classes or watched my YouTube channels, I am constantly moving my hands around. So if I could learn some where I could just, not that I have to rein my hands in, that's okay, but I could intentionally just like toss some mudras in while I am talking, or to reset myself. Like I don't know if you can see on camera, but sometimes I will kind of put my hands together in certain positions and I don't know exactly what those are. So that would be really interesting for me to learn about, like what positions am I kind of intuitively putting my hands into, or what are ones that could aid me in moving the prana in a way that will be supportive, not just to keep me focused, but really the number one is like to keep me grounded. I got to like clear the energy out. So that would be something that I would love to learn more about. I was incredibly excited to read Angela's chapter because actually, if you watch the previous installments of Book Club, this made it into one of the bloopers. So I was flipping ahead in the book and I said, why is this chapter title so long? And it's because it was like half the page was the title and it caught my eye and it was actually this chapter. I was really excited to read this and it did not disappoint. She was talking about burnout and how it's a manifestation of, quote, living in a state of dis-ease rather than disease, dis-ease. Oh, and it's like you couldn't have said it more perfectly because I'm someone who, not semi-regular basis, but sure, I probably live in some constant degree of near burnout, and then I have different cycles of very intense burnout. And yeah, that's such a good way to describe it because you are lacking ease. Your nervous system is not resetting. You are not connected to the present. You're not connected to your body, to your breath, to your intuition. Like you are so out of energetic and physical alignment. And I love this idea of healing that comes from within being linked to who you are intrinsically as a person, plus the obvious, like what you eat, exercise, doshas. We had talked about that in the Ayurveda episode, the food episode in season 2. And it's all coming together, similar to what I was mentioning for Emma's section about how you can have all these different practices. And what she had said, I'll read a quote here: no tool or practice will work unless it aligns with your soul's blueprint. So you can use multiple tools in tandem, and that it's worth experimenting. It's worth testing out specifically what works for you. In some ways, because having that holistic thinking paired with there not being a one size fits all, just because somebody else tries a certain diet or, cuts this out or that out or exercises this way or that way, doesn't mean that it's going to work for you and for your body, for your energy levels. I mean, we've talked about so many methodologies in this podcast, like your human design. There's going to be certain lifestyle practices or ways of operating that work for me, but don't work for you if you're not a manifesting generator. And astrology does a similar thing, which is really what we're talking about here. This is looking at your astrological natal chart through the lens of medical astrology. I think I watched a workshop some time ago that was talking a little bit about health. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I haven't really dove in and studied it more, but it's something I have had a little interest in. And ultimately, what she was talking about is that if we actually tend to and care for our bodies, not only is that an act of just kind of obvious self-care, it's an act of taking care of your spirit too. So, like I was just talking about with Emma's chapter, that it's linking the physical body with the spiritual body, the energetic body. Those pieces are all from you in physical form, your spirit team, your energy level chakra system, the cosmos, the planetary elements and influences. This is yet another example. I'm reading this at exactly the right time. At the point I was reading this, I was really in the height of my burnout for 2026. And I was just completely like, I need to be done and over this. I need to get out. And so to get some of these reminders and just have the spark of curiosity and interest. Like, I was jazzed when I saw that she also did a workshop, and she was starting off by explaining same thing, how she studied all of these different modalities, sound healing, flower essences, yoga, energy work, in addition to astrology. So in that way, when she's interpreting somebody's chart, she can leverage those other tools and remedies for the medical support. And I think it's something that then in her specific practice and work, that it serves her well, because yes, I channel very often just intuitive guidance for people. So it could be a specific journaling practice or testing something out with different modalities. But if I actually studied any of them a little bit more in depth, then I would have additional terminology. Again, every time I'm reading a chapter in this book, I'm just thinking of new things I have to research. What is most inspiring for me is seeing what everybody else has been learning and then recognizing, okay, yeah, I have learned a lot. And there's a lot of things that I do know now that I did not know before, and skill sets that I have developed. But to stay curious and keep your oar sparkling, but to stay curious, keep asking questions, and really working on the podcast this season in particular has allowed me to tap into that. In the workshop itself, she went through each of the 4 elements. That's earth, air, fire, and water. When she was talking about the water element, I was like, why is this me on this slide? Even though the objective was that you were focusing on your sun sign because it's like your life force, vitality, energy, it did resonate with the fire one because I'm an Aries. But when I was reading that water one, I was like, that's me. That's what I want. That's what I need. And I think just because I was especially feeling burnt out, I was like, that's the direction that I want to go. Those things sound like exactly the medicine that I need for this moment. And that is why when she was teaching about creating this birthday element essence spray, which of course I was reading 3 days before my birthday, and I went, talk about divine timing. I had all of the materials to make the water element version. So rather than doing the fire one, which is what she had instructed, I went rogue. Sometimes we got to go rogue. And intuitively, I was getting encouraged to do that as well. Like, I asked for backup of like, is this okay that I do this? And it was like, yes. So I just felt like that was really what I needed. So 3 days later, I sat down, but on my windowsill, I had a glass, distilled water, drops of sandalwood, cinnamon sticks that I put in. So they were absorbing and then expanding and unfurling as the day went on. So I did that first thing in the morning, and then had an amethyst crystal and my peach moonstone flanking it. And then once it got to the end of the day, just before the sun was setting, I transferred it into an amber glass bottle, and then I have it up on my dresser next to my cards. So the idea is I pull my cards each day, and either right before, right after, one dropper full into your hand. And then I just kind of press it together because otherwise it's just straight liquid, it's going to fall. So I press some of that and then just rub it on the nape of my neck. And then I'll just put my hands over my nose and mouth and just do one deep intentional inhale. So it's kind of like locking the energy in. And what she was saying is that you do this on your birthday. And then I was thinking, there's no way this is going to last. Oh my gosh, this is probably going to last until my next birthday because not that much comes out when you do one dropper. But she said that you could start to feel more of an energetic shift after around 3 months. And as of recording this, I'm still under a month, so I'm not even that far out. But it is nice. I think I'm someone who lacks a bit in the ritual department, so it's something that's very simple. And I had obviously set, intention for that, infusing it when I was creating it. And so, yeah, I'll give an update if I start noticing any other shifts, but otherwise I haven't changed any other practices or introduced anything else. Last chapter we have written by Michelle, and she was also asking some very existential questions similar to Emma. And I remarked while reading it, I wish I had downloads to travel. And as I started to write that down, just popped into my head, you do, LOL. So, and you'll hear as I go through the rest of my notes, my guides were like super chatty in this chapter. And I don't know if it's specifically just what Michelle was talking about, or it was the culmination of this was the fourth chapter of 4 that I was reading. So I was in this headspace and kind of tapping in and connecting with everybody for an hour to an hour and a half. So I don't know exactly what was bringing it about, but they had a lot of comments as I was reading and as I was taking notes on Michelle's story. Similar to Holly, who I spoke about in the first installment of Book Club, Holly wrote chapter 4. She had an Egypt story, and she had experienced a lot of synchronicities while she was there. So this is an example of spirit interruption because I'm trying to read her story and my brain just shot off somewhere else. Like it was like a full clairvoyant vision situation because there was an entire storyline that was playing out, and I'll recap it quick here. Like it wasn't me, but was it me? I don't know. But I was just in the perspective of somebody that was going on a tour. They sensed an ancient goddess that was there, essentially was channeling to the tour guide and telling them to refer to the goddess by a different name and to do a ritual to honor the temple rather than just going on the tour every day and calling it sacred. So this was very fascinating because if you remember when I did the first block of readings, including Holly's, I was shot off into all of these memories, like every chapter, like I just went somewhere else. And this felt like that, except this wasn't a memory. I didn't do this. This never happened to me. There's just this very specific quality to it where okay, I'm getting nudged to think about this or reflect on this. And I don't know if this vision is a premonition or if it's a message for somebody in particular. If this actually happened to someone and I was just receiving it. So please write in if you feel like this does relate and has happened to you. I would be very curious. I also wanted to mention that I really admired Michelle's just absolute conviction when discussing her past life and how much it informs her present day and purpose. I have been told intuitively by multiple different readers that I have a particularly old soul that's like jumped some lifetimes to get here. I was pausing to think about that, and then I had another interruption from my spirit team. Quote, which is why adapting and the learning curve has been really hard. All I'm doing is like trying to weigh my energy or how I am processing things. So whether it be my emotions I mentioned before, or my energy levels, or how much I am giving versus receiving, or the practices, or do I have rituals? Do I not have rituals? I feel like I'm just constantly learning and unlearning and adjusting where those lines are and boundaries, of course, and just the way of moving through life, not always wanting to just do what other people are doing, which has its pros and sometimes has its cons. So yeah, I know this is something I really have to unpack more. And I mentioned earlier about doing more of that, the past life meditations. And this just became like yet another nudge. But I'm also still being told like it's not about living in the past to just receive an instruction about what to do, but that when we can have additional context, sometimes it just not helps color it, but helps us to reframe or maybe actually integrate some of it a little bit faster. That's just what's coming in as I'm sharing this. I did do a Akashic Records reading after reading this chapter, but I ended up falling asleep like almost instantly. So I will have to circle back again with my different Nirvana meditations, past life, and Akashic Records and see if I can glean anything else that might be especially applicable for me in the present. But thank you, Michelle, for the nudge and the reminder. There really was an overall theme of our relationship with spirituality and religion, our choice of how to engage and apply, our season 2 theme of how are we implementing these methods into our day-to-day practice. And of course, I'm doing that in the mini series, in those in practice episodes, this kind of running drum of, well, how can we make this tangible? How can we use these tools and these practices to enhance our lives, whether that be our relationships with other people, with ourselves, our health, our confidence, our sense of wonder and inspiration. And so I do look forward to having many more adventures. But for now, I have been thoroughly enjoying over these past few months diving into and exploring the past through lore and living out those stories just in the comfort of my home and in the pockets of time when I can do that because my schedule been crazy. And also the experimentation for those lore and practice episodes. It's allowing me to stretch and expand a little bit in a way that I can actually handle right now when things have been so hectic. But I do know, and I'm already at that point where things are starting to clear up more and I have more bandwidth, more of a headspace, a bit of my energy is getting more back online and leveled out. So I do look forward to and hope that I can also actually go on a trip somewhere, not just within my own mind or with my intuition or in my dreams, because I consistently have dreams about going on trips or that I live somewhere else. And I haven't been doing anything about that for some period of time. To close out here, I am going to be doing another reading session soon. So I don't know as of recording this what chapters I will be covering. But the cadence as of now is it's been monthly that I've been sitting down and reading for anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. And I'm getting through either 3 or 4 chapters. That will probably increase over the summer because we'll have a bit of a break in programming with the different lore mini series, and I'll just have some more of the book club sessions. So if you want to get ahead, you can also read ahead, or you can just wait for the next instruction. That batch in that Roman lore in practice episode, I will announce whatever the next chapter is that I haven't even read yet. So if you do read ahead, don't tell me about any of the other stories because I do want to experience them fresh. And of course, I'm telling you what are my completely unfiltered reactions or intuitive guidance and messages that are coming through when I am reading these. So feel free to comment, email, message me with any thoughts or reflections on 1 through 11. We're a third of the way through the book. Oh my gosh. As I mentioned before, it's a book club if there's members. So please do comment and share your personal stories, ask me questions. If there's anything that I mentioned today that you particularly resonated with or you want more clarification on, I can also always elaborate on any of the stories, or I can follow up on that, rock memory situation and share that if people are interested. So just let me know. But otherwise, keep reading, keep exploring the lore, and next episode that will come into your feed will be our next installment of Roman lore in modernity. Drip a little bit, 1 syringe. Is that right? Dropper, the little droplet. So you just get 1. Wow, I cannot think of the word.